Hey, freight agents, are you tired of being held back? Since 2012, Tallgrass Freight has built a proven track record at the top tier independent freight agent network, and we're just getting started. Here, our agents get the best of both worlds, the freedom to be true entrepreneurs paired with the full support of a company that has their back, uncapped commission, zero territory restrictions, and a world-class back office. At Tallgrass, you're never just a number. You're part of a network that values independence, celebrates success, and invests in your future. Whether you're a solo agent or leading a team, Tallgrass gives you the tools, transparency, and flexibility to grow your business on your terms. No corporate red tape, no micromanaging, just freedom, support, and unlimited potential. To join our team, visit tallgrassfreight.com/podcast. That's tallgrassfreight.com/podcast. Welcome to the Recruiting Stories Podcast, where we celebrate recruiting by exploring the stories of leaders and top performers by digging into their stories and understanding how recruiting has impacted their journey and their success. All right, guys, welcome to the next edition of the Recruiting Stories Podcast. This week, our guest is Bryan Nelson, partner at Taylor Nelson. Bryan, thank you for joining us, man.
Hey, I am absolutely happy to be here. When I saw your invite, obviously the first thing I said was, no, I can't do it. I'm on vacation. And then immediately was like, yeah, let's do it right after. So I am back. I am like a week removed from one of the more stressful vacations I've had, as we talked about before, really just a trip with a child.
Exactly.
And then, I'm here ready to rock and ready to discuss everything. I don't know if I'm going to have to eat something spicy or not, but I'm prepared for it all.
Push-up contest. You have to eat something spicy while talking about legal issues. So it'll be really exciting. Hopefully you're ready.
Great. Let's do it.
Well, okay. For guests who don't know you, tell us about Bryan and I guess Taylor Nelson. You know, your firm. You guys specialize in transportation. Yes, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I am with the law firm of Taylor Nelson. We are a transportation boutique firm. We have clients all over the country. We have focused our practice solely and squarely on transportation, and how that kind of blends into kind of our operations within the industry is that we have a host of former general counsels in our firm. I was general counsel for transport. We'll talk about later today. Almost all my partners have been general counsels for a transportation company or within government. And we have an associate as well that was a former general counsel. So we have, not just, as I say to my clients, when I tell you something, I'm not saying it because I read it in a book and it sounds really cool and I know that person is smart, so I'm just repeating that. It's, hey, I did this in real life, and oh, by the way, it worked out horribly for me, so do it this other way, right? So we have that kind of, that hindsight being 2020, we can kind of walk through in our collective. We have over 70 years of GC experience. So we do a lot of, outside GC work, or what the kids are calling fractional GC work. So we come in and help clients, random things every day. Instead of just doing it for one client, I'm doing it for multiple clients. And all my partners and associates are doing all of those things as well. So anything within transportation, whether you're a warehouseman, a broker, a carrier, freight forwarder, rail company, LTL, truckload, parcel, home delivery, or your tanker, or one of the transportation network companies, and freight tech, anything that touches transportation, we're there. And we try not to go too far outside of that. Now, some of our clients have crazy things that come up, and we'll help handle that. But focus primarily on transportation, everything from litigation, contract reviews, cargo claims, employment matters, payment disputes, demurrage, anything dealing with the ports, things that we handle that on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's super cool. So candidly, Bryan and I met at the TIA conference. It was awesome just to, see someone who specializes specifically in that. Not that I guess I didn't know that before, but great to see, Bryan with boots on the ground, meeting with people at the Transportation Intermediaries conference, as was I, meeting with clients and new clients and things like that. But cool that you focus on that. Sidebar, do you and I guess we'll get into more of this kind of stuff later, but do you just kind of in what you have done over the years, do you see like a bulk of issues or cases in any one area more than others? Like, is there something where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what we do 80% of the time versus, oh, like demurrage is a very small portion of our caseload?
Say that each one of our partners handles, different things primarily, even though there's a lot of cross pollination. We kind of treat ourselves like a general counsel's office where the client doesn't really care who does the work. They want the work done in a timely manner. No one's like hoarding, work. And so inevitably people get really efficient at certain things. So if I get a client that has an issue, I'll pass it on. Some of my clients are really big on the regulatory compliance matters, dealing with audits and other things from the FMCSA or state regulatory agencies. A lot of the stuff that I deal with on a day-to-day basis is corporate restructuring, mergers, acquisitions, and then contract reviews, and then cargo claims. Those are kind of the big things that I deal with on a regular basis, as well as a lot of the home delivery, regulatory compliance, and auto hauler type work. That's kind of where my focus a lot is. And just from the nature of it, cargo claims come up, especially with the fraud and the staff and kind of working with items to help reduce that, help carrier selection policies be drafted and created. Then also, defend against cargo claims and really put in parameters regarding insurance. Like we have my partner, JW Taylor, he's very heavily involved in the MCIF, the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation. Mm-hmm. Any type of insurance question you have about anything, or you need someone to connect with to help get a different policy, he is the person to go to. And so he really focuses on that. And so I'll send it over to him if there's something that's there. So we really, going back to your question, one of the things I work on, again, M&A, cargo claims, and contracts. And generally the things that I handle day in, day out, I can guarantee you I will have one of each day.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, let's go back to your recruiting story. I want to talk about just obviously as a recruiting firm, like how you landed in being, an attorney, but then also like why freight. So you're from Florida. We talked about that. You Florida State Seminole, yes?
Yes.
How are they going to do this year, by the way?
It's a completely different team. There is you having children. You've probably seen the movie Zootopia, where she has a terrible day. She goes back to her hotel room. The walls are very thin. And she goes, tomorrow's a new day. And the neighbor goes, yeah, but it could be worse. I'm feeling, this is a new season, but it could always be worse. So I have no aspirations. I'm eternally optimistic person. So I am believing we are going to win the national title, but we could win one game and be just completely run off the field every day. So.
The highs and lows with Florida State have been shocking to me because I'm like, there's such a hotbed of talent down there. And like you guys truly can be on the top of the world one year. And then as we saw last year, could not be the very next year. So
this way. So and we're getting down a rabbit hole pretty quickly here. Because this is a recruiting podcast.
I know. So sorry.
This is exciting. No, so a lot of the schools down here, like IMG Academy, right? They talk about, we got to protect Florida and not let recruits go otherwise. Well, we have such large high schools that develop these kids into these amazing athletes. Well, they didn't grow up here. They got shipped wherever they were. So they have no allegiance to Florida. So even though they're deemed a Florida kid, right. They grew up in Ohio, came down to IMG Academy or one of the big schools, St. Thomas, anywhere down there. And then they just go back to where they, the state that they grew up in.
Go back to California or wherever.
Wisconsin. Yep. I grew up in Wisconsin. I just came down here for this, and I'm going to go back to Wisconsin. So we run into that, but financial ability, we'll see what happens with the House settlement. But anyways, that was a fun little jaunt.
Sorry. Yes. If you ever decide to take a rabbit trail into college football, I will follow you down that rabbit trail as far as you want to. So just an FYI for you and
I stopped watching every other sport because my heart I couldn't break so often because most teams right out there will lose multiple times in horrible fashion. And I just could not get myself to follow. I can't follow professional sports. College football is it ruins the rest of my year. or it makes it amazing. And then I am one of the people that watch college baseball, college softball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care much for college basketball, but we're not a basketball school.
There you go. Yeah, I can't get too emotionally attached to too many sports team. Otherwise, I'm too high all the time. So
you don't have time to get in a bad mood.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I can't change my schedule just for a game that often. But anyways, okay, back to the podcast, everyone. Bryan, the Florida State Seminole. You studied, you were pre-law, I assume, and then you went to Stetson?
I did go to Stetson. So my undergraduate, I double majored in accounting and finance. I was thinking about being an accountant. And no offense to all the accountants out there, and I'll say that to my CFO as well. Or, I didn't want to be an accountant. When I went through it all, I got to the end and I was like, I don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I also never wanted to work in a law firm. So let me be completely candid there.
Yeah.
Law school was like, hey, let's go ahead and do this. This was right before the crash. This was right before the economic downturn. So we're like, let's go to law school. Everyone keeps telling me you invest in your education. We don't need to talk about student loans, but like, hey, go out and do this. This is what you need to do. Go get an education. More education, the better. So I'm like, you know what? I think I'll go to law school. So went down to Stetson in the St. Pete area, got my law degree here and my MBA. And I was like, okay, well, how do I transition this? I didn't want to be in a law firm. I always had the plan of being working for a business and assisting there, using my MBA, using my accounting and finance degree.
Cool. Okay. So accounting, finance, you're like, that's great. Was there any one person that was like an attorney that you were like, they're cool, I want to follow in that footstep or anything like that?
No, I think it was actually the opposite. I think I knew a bunch of accountants and I was like, nah, no, sir.
Yeah.
So law was pretty foreign to me when I did. I didn't know any attorneys. I didn't know anyone that was currently in law school. It was completely kind of like hey, let's jump. And so just kind of jumped from there and went into it.
Dove in. Okay, so then tell me so you dive into that. Like, how do you connect to transportation and how do you connect to logistics?
So it's essentially having a bunch of people ghost me when it was time to go to our softball game. So,
okay.
So first year of law school, they tell you your classes. Your classes are these set of classes, and they give you your schedule. You have no discretion. This is what it is. So met a bunch of kids in law school, all pretty active, sports wise, all pretty good shape. We're like, hey, let's put together a law school softball team and go out and play city league and just something, once a week to kind of take our minds off of the rigors of school. I go through the process. I'm like, hey man, I'm a type A personality. So I'm like, I'm organizing this. Mm-hmm. I'm like, hey, it looks great. Hey, let's do that. Bring him on, right? He looks like he can mash a ball. And then, that guy, he's fast as hell. I saw him in intramural, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I put together this team and at the end of it, day comes to start collecting money to go pay the city league. And everyone's like, man, we're going to be pretty busy. So it's just like me and my one friend who were like, well, we can't really have a team of two. So I guess we're not doing this. So everybody, I had a whole team of like 13 guys and they all said no at the end. Like, oh, we're just going to be two. I'm like, you guys can't spare 2 hours a week. You guys are not budgeting your time appropriately. So anyways, the season starts. I wait like a week or two. I go to the fields to try to get picked up by a team. I'm walking around first series of anyone that plays, recreational softball knows that there's like 3 or 4 lots of games a night and different variations of leagues. First round of games, there's like 4 fields in St. Pete all in this area. So nobody needs somebody. The next round is about to start. This kid comes running up to me like, hey, are you looking for a team? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, one of our guys got thrown out of the league last week for throwing a bat at an umpire. We need someone. Come on. That was a trucking company. So I worked with them. Awesome. So I started playing softball with a trucking company that had a brokerage. And I played with them for 3 years through law school. The summer I was sitting for the bar. The COO was on the team with me. And he goes, hey, man, we just got a private equity firm just invested and we are looking to, shore up our processes and get more professional. We're hiring certain roles. One of them's general counsel. Would you be interested? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So, I do my research. I figure out as much as I can on transportation within, the 2 weeks before my interview. Go in there, communicate everything that I can about, what I know about trans. And I'm sure I probably use very generic terms, and they're like, okay, cool guy. But I assume I probably did better than everyone else because they ended up hiring me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how. And I had another interview the next day. And so I was like, they offered me the job on the spot at the interview. And I said, listen, I owe it to my wife and my family. Actually, just my wife at the time. I said, I owe it to my wife.
You had another family.
The other. I had, I owed it to my wife to go check out, the other interview the next day. And I remember I was at the next interview, and everything seemed really great with the company, with the trucking company. And I said, well, what can I do over here? And I go to the interview, and I remember this is 2009. So I am looking at, not really culture. Permaculture isn't really something that comes up a lot, but of course I'm trying to master interviewing.
Right.
And we graduated law school at a time when all of the first year people had just been let go because the market turned. So I'm competing with everybody that graduated and everybody from the year before, and anyone who graduated in 2009, 2010, you have a very similar experience as to what I went through. So I'm not saying that I'm unique in any facet of the imagination, but when I went to that next firm and I was talking with them, I asked them, hey, what's your culture like? And if you're not prepared for this question, my God, make up something better. But there were two partners that were interviewing me. They look at each other, they kind of hem and haw, and one person goes, well, I guess I'll, and he looks at me and goes, well, I like to work on the weekends. And I'm like, what?
Yes.
Like, I'm sitting here going, okay, one of my big goals, and we talked about Florida State, was, listen, as soon as I get a real big boy job, right, as a lawyer, I'm going to buy season tickets and I'm going to be a season ticket holder. That was one of the things that I wanted. I was like, if this guy likes to come in on the weekend, he's a partner. What do you think he as an associate is going to have to do? And I'm not naive to what a lawyer needs to do. But if the culture is, we like to work on weekends, let's put that tagline and just be truthful that says you will not have a life.
Yeah.
And so I get out of the interview, I was like, absolutely not. And I called the owner of the trucking company. I was like, hey, I'm in. Let's do this.
That's awesome.
So that was.
I guess at least he was honest, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the candor, but had I not asked that question and I got an offer, I would have been like, oh, this is great. And then, where are you?
I love the fact that you played softball with a group that like connected you to the industry. Like how random is that like without that exposure, you may never have, connected to transportation otherwise, right?
Well, because and this is the fault of the legal community and the legal educational community. They do not teach transportation law. There is a University of Denver, as a law school that focuses and a curriculum focused on transportation law. Outside of the University of Denver, it's almost non-existent. Transportation law. I petitioned my law school to teach a transportation law class. At the end of every semester, at the end of your finals, they give you kind of a list that says, hey, here's some curriculums, or here's some courses that we're considering adding to the curriculum. Are you interested? And every time I do it, there's not enough interest in transportation law. So people coming out of law school, when we are interviewing, I know we'll probably talk about this later, but when I'm interviewing lawyers, they have no exposure to transportation law. Maybe they did one case if they were in a business litigation firm. But if they're coming out of law school, they have no idea. They have no exposure to it. And I can't hold it against them because I didn't when I left law school either.
Do you think it's just because like transportation is not sexy? It's like not the cool case law that's out there, or is it just they don't have exposure and we need to do a better job of making sure that universities have that?
I don't think that it's identified as a sub-market within business litigation. I think they throw it into business. They look at, you can be a patent attorney because there's extra. You can be a tax attorney because there's extra schooling that's needed there. And then you just have general business and it all lumps into it. Even though we talk about contracts, we talk about construction law, we talk about those things that are, ancillary and can assist with transportation understanding, but they just don't delve into it. So my transportation exposure up to this point, I mean, I was learning what a broker was in studying my interview because I'm like, what the heck does this mean? And I can tell you the cool thing about going into transportation, especially when I was general counsel, was when all my attorney friends got together and they were like, hey, my mom or my aunt or my neighbor, hey, do you know a wills and estates attorney? Do you know, they have a criminal issue. Can they help? Can you help with that? And they're all talking and they're all saying, oh, yeah, I know. And then I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. Anybody own a tractor trailer that needs help?
Right.
So it's nice because a lot of your friends don't come to you or family doesn't come to you and ask you for free legal advice. So I can just be like, no, don't do that. So that's
just
what
trucks and trailers. I'm sorry, I can't help you with your,
Oh, a tractor trailer warehouse? No, your Uber driver? No. All right, we're good. Leave me out of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so then how did you then end up saying, like, I guess, how does Taylor Nelson come about? How do you guys say, all right, we're going to start a transportation focused firm? What are the steps there? I guess the overview there.
So I did not start the firm. I came into a fully functioning firm, was on a great trajectory. I happened to be swept up in its current. And I will say this, I was happy where I was in-house. I was blissfully unaware about the outside world. I was doing my job. I was doing it well. I knew what to do day in, day out. I had great people that I worked with. The owner of the company was absolutely fantastic. And she, I was also a minority owner. So me leaving the company was kind of a big deal. Occurred. But I will say this, I got Huck Finned. Let me kind of put context into that. There was during COVID, and I'm a member of the Transportation Lawyers Association. They were doing a presentation about something, and as I like to do, whenever someone does a presentation and that I attend, and it was all virtual. I'll shoot them an email, and connect with them on LinkedIn and shoot them a message. Hey, thank you, for putting this presentation on. I really appreciated it. If I did, right? If I didn't like it, I'll say, hey, that was terrible. Don't ever do that again. No, I won't say that. But
I'll keep an eye out for an email later.
Yeah. So I go through and do that, and I reach out to them, and the attorneys are in Clearwater, which is just a 30-minute drive north of me. And they're like, hey, you're local. Let's grab lunch. And so that started this recruitment process of about 6 to 8 months of me saying, I'm happy. No, I'm making good money. I don't need to move.
Yep.
To then being like, oh, all right, maybe there is something here. I'll do it. Only for a year later, the partner that brought me over ends up going in-house. So I totally was like, hey, come paint this private practice fence with me. I'm like, this is pretty fun. Wait, where'd you go?
Right.
Your house. That was cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And I say that to her jokingly to her face. So I'm not
sure.
But it is a story I like to say in that manner. So I come into private practice. The lead partner, J.W. Taylor, was general counsel for a large, $1 billion transportation family of companies that's no longer in existence. And he was there. He's the one who started this. Our firm, I believe, is 15 years old. And so just absolutely, great foundation, fantastic client. So I walked into something ready-made. Now I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a general counsel. I never had to do billable hours. How am I going to do it? Am I going to hit hours? I'm super scared. Because that's one thing. Everyone called me crazy for leaving general counsel work.
Yep.
And I can tell you, anyone that's a general counsel in transportation, it is nonstop. Right. I have a picture of me working on a boat on a river. We went to go see some manatees here in Florida. And I had my laptop and my daughter sitting next to me in her life jacket. I'm working on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Laptop, because there are things that need to be done in terms of, a carrier selection or a cargo claim situation that arose, and I have to jump in and handle it. And so I will say that I don't work less. I don't think I work more, but I think my hours are more intentional as opposed to the random things, because when you're a competent person, you usually generally get all of the things come to your desk to say, oh, well, he can handle it. And so I was getting a lot of those things. And
Yep.
when I came out to private practice, I realized I was doing all the same things, only now for multiple people, multiple clients.
Yep. That's cool. Yep. I mean, I can relate just jumping out and starting my own recruiting firm, like, hey, I've done this in house and very busy. But now you can be as busy as you want to be when you're doing it for multiple clients. And I'll also, I guess, say too, like that story of how you jumped over and maybe someone recruited you. That's it's a something I see from the recruiting side all the time. And sometimes that's one of those situations where they'll get pulled over somewhere, and I mean, business is such a people, you know, um, thing. It's always about people, but it's like, hey, maybe so and so recruited me over here, and then maybe they just got a better opportunity somewhere, and like can't fault them or whatever the situation is. But then that completely changes my outlook, and maybe I do want to move on. That's when we get a chance to help move people sometimes. If like, hey, my VP, my president who recruited me, now they're gone, so now I'm gonna look somewhere else. Or maybe they're like, hey, now I get to take on more work because that person's gone, and now I get to focus on that. So,
Yeah,
anyways, very common.
there's a few things to think about. Is one is make sure that you understand and you're not leaving just for one person.
Yeah.
Now that may be something that works out for you and it's great. But there was a whole grouping of people, and I will say when we lost that partner, was a fantastic attorney to in-house, which that company remained a client of ours. We did a lot of the outsourced work for that client and still doing. It's one of those things where you're building relationships because when we lose attorneys, they don't go to other firms. They go in-house, right? To an opportunity. And I get in-house opportunities regularly. People asking me to come in, and I have such a good group of attorneys. And so in her moving on, one of the focuses of the firm was, okay, we lose people at in-house. Well, maybe we can start getting in-house people to come to us. And that's what we've done. And so we've created this in-house kind of, we try to run it like a corporation. You get PTO, you get these other things. And I remember when I came to the firm, because you have billable hour requirements. And I remember asking about PTO, not realizing it didn't matter. Like, hey, listen, one of the big things was my daughter does competitive cheer, and I needed to be at every competition.
Right.
When I was in house, all my PTO was spent on going to competitions for my daughter, the travel time back and forth all over the country. And I would say one of those things was, hey, listen, if I move over, I can't forego that opportunity. I need the promises and assurances that that's something I can continue to do. And I was like, I had a lot, I had like 5 weeks of PTO. I was coming over here. They're like, oh, you get 2 weeks. I was like, listen, I need more than that. And so those are one of the soft benefits you negotiate. But in her offer, I feel like, looking back, I feel like Zoolander and saying, like, what is this, a school for ants? It needs to be like 3 times as big. And she's like, yeah, he's absolutely right. I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, I need more PTO. They're like, well, you have billable hour requirements. I don't really care when you take off. They're like, sure, have all the PTO you want, but you still need to hit your billable hours. They're like, oh, cool. I didn't really get it.
Well, yeah, it's like a mindset shift, right? Because I mean, even to like, I mean, we get to talk freight world, whether you're a freight agent or, in my world, if you're a 1099 recruiter, like you can take off as much time as you want, like, but if you want to make the money that you want, you've got to do whatever that takes. And that's a shift of like, almost like an ownership shift, I feel like, than it is like, oh, like I'm used to my 9 to 5 type of mentality, which there's nothing wrong with. It's a shift in mentality on how to be productive, I guess.
Yeah, and I will say this, 9 to 5 for a general counsel. If you have that job, congratulations. That's not how most general counsels are. And the one thing that I will say about general counsels and being assistant general counsels or associate general counsels or general counsel regarding this matter, there's usually someone up at the top that's a general counsel or chief legal officer or some sort of title. And usually there's one person that can be that. You could be like the Prince Hans, right? If we're going to borrow another cartoon reference, you could be the Prince Hans where you're seventh in line to the throne, and you'll always be that until the people ahead of you retire or leave. And if they're, they're still kicking and doing good work, you probably will be sitting there for a while. And so a law firm, we can put as many chairs around the table. We just keep putting leaves in the table, and we can keep adding partners to the firm to grow it. And so that's really, you take of all the deadly sins out there, pride is not really one of them that I feel like is really afflicts me. And so I want to share in what we're doing here and always be able to grow what we're building.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's a good mentality. I want to jump to and get to maybe some transportation specific stuff. As I had mentioned offline, like have some thoughts, questions, maybe from people specifically in the industry. And I know you deal with a variety of things, right? You guys are experts in transportation across the board, which is what makes you guys unique and special at Taylor Nelson. At least from what I see on my end, a lot of the thing, and maybe this is just the relevance of where I'm at. Obviously, it's different than your seat, but I'm seeing kind of like primary conversations around fraud, broker carrier liability, and then obviously like recruiting and non-competes. And I know there's a whole other world of things there. Talk to me, I guess, first about let's cover the recruiting one first, just because obviously we're on that one, and then we'll jump into maybe some specific stuff. But like non-competes, non-solicits, obviously there's a whole world of things there. I'm just going to open it up to you there. What should people be aware of broadly, generally, if you're an organization or if you're an individual?
Yeah, I think I will say that generally most of my clients that have non-competes are really not as hugely concerned with the non-compete part as it really is the non-solicit, both of employees, customers, and vendors.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody wants to stand in the way of someone. Well, I won't say nobody. Most people generally just want to protect what they have. And when you leave, they want to make sure that you do not interfere with that. And whether you've signed a non-compete or not, there are still what's called trade secrets, right? And there are trade secret protections out there. So whether you have a non-compete or not, that doesn't mean you can take customer lists. That doesn't mean you can just take employee lists. There are protections for those just innate in being an employee and leaving. And so if you think, I don't have a non-compete, I can just do whatever the heck I want to. If you have to put it or download it or write it and email it, then you do not have that in your head. And you can't go to a judge and say, hey, judge, well, this is stuff I already knew. If you already knew it, you didn't have to write it down or download it. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, really this battle between, people within the industry, and we are involved in some of those battles where, an employee leaves and the non-compete, as much as they want to protect certain things and say, hey, we don't want to keep someone out of the industry and ability to earn work, there are some non-compete portions of it beyond the non-solicits that are inherently adversarial. And so you can say, oh, well, they don't really care so much about the non-compete. That's fine, so long as they don't take their customers. But if you're developing a system, and let's say, some of my freight tech clients, you creating a different freight tech company is inherently, whether you're directly soliciting clients or not, that is inherently, adversarial. And so there's definitely an effort to put that down. Same thing with, brokerage operations or carrier operations, where you go out and create things. Now you have certain protections as an agent, being an independent contractor, and the ability to, go out and service your existing clients. But if you're a salesperson and you have a book of business and you come into a new company, just be prepared that, that language of a company can be used to protect the company from things that you had. And also, if you're someone with a book, says you have a book of business coming into a new company, be honest about the restrictive covenants, because most companies, like, there's so much work out there. Don't put me in a position to where I have to now decide whether to fire you because you didn't tell me what was coming into me, that you have a non-compete. So be honest with employers, because they may already have a relationship with the other employer. This is a small industry, even though it's as big as it is. people know each other, the owners know each other, the companies know each other. They work together on a lot of things, even though they're
Totally.
competitors. But if you get a reputation for that, it's pretty quickly to become untouchable in the industry if you don't disclose those types of things.
And I'll jump in there too. I mean, it's, for me, that's always say like it should never be a surprise to your recruiter. Like obviously let us know, and of course it should never be a surprise to the the new organization. Like you're just putting yourself one for you automatically lose trust. So how can we work with you if we've already broken trust at that point? But then obviously, just from a legal standpoint, like, well, now we've got this to deal with too that we didn't know about. And we've got to, pull back the curtains on this, these covenants that we didn't know were there. And can you even help us at this point?
that is correct.
It's like, so to me, I think if I'm giving advice, it's be honest about whatever covenants that you are aware of. You need to be as upfront on those as you can.
Yeah.
I
Kind of piggyback on that. When you leave your employment, your other employment, do not burn bridges, because the more fire that you leave behind, the greater the risk of them being motivated to take you down. And if they have the contractual opportunity to do so through your non-compete, non-solicit, or even through trade secrets, they're going to do so if you leave in a very aggressive way.
100%. And I think it's important too to go back to what the very beginning, like the origin of the non-compete and or non-solicit is a protective mechanism. So, whether you as an individual believe the intent of that or not, like people, I know we both read LinkedIn and some of these like these are not out just to totally screw people. Like I know, there are some bad cases out there, but like a non-compete and non-solicit for the individual who made the company, and especially the company owner myself, like I can totally understand why those things exist now. Like because like it would really stink if somebody, I brought them on, I poured into them, and then they just like went and like yanked my best customers and a high amount of income, margin, revenue, whatever. That would really suck. And so I understand why these things exist. They exist to stop that from happening. And that's what people do need to understand is like it's not just to screw you over for no reason. It's typically a protective mechanism for the organization, most of the time.
Again. And lawyers aren't exempt from this. So as a general counsel, I was also chief administrative officer. My accounting and finance degree, came into into practice there. I oversaw HR, I oversaw the accounting and finance, I oversaw risk, insurance, everything along those lines. And I was in house for 12 years, so we saw everything. Having a broker entity, a motor carrier entity, and a freight tech company that had its own TMS that we marketed to third parties. And I would sit here and tell you that if I were to go to a different in-house counsel role, because of all the things that I did, if I was truly legal only in that in-house counsel role, because if there's all these different associate general counsel, I'm just a counsel of contracts or counsel of risk, there is a potential that I, as general counsel, would be excluded through a non-compete from working for another company. There's still that risk, even though there are protections under the ABA model rules that says attorneys are not to sign non-competes and be subject to non-competes. I was doing a lot of non-legal work, as a business owner. There's also other restrictions involved in that are separate and apart from my legal work. But jumping to a firm for doing that, well, we can't preclude attorneys or for the general public from choosing the attorneys that they want to work with. So attorneys have a little bit different rules due to our code of ethics, but individuals within transportation, even if you have a law degree, if you're doing transportation work, you would be subject to it.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I just think people have to be aware of like the potential consequences and just to be careful out there. Here's a question I hear sometimes: if somebody's being advised, like, "Oh, this non-compete is not enforceable in my state," but maybe it is in this state. how do you prove that? Like, is that typically like in the non-compete itself? Is there language there?
The non-compete will generally tell you what state law governs, where the jurisdictional disputes are to be held. But I can tell you that every every state, think about it like quicksand. Like, hey, listen, we need to be over here. Well, I'm standing in this state. It doesn't want to let me go. States have an interest in protecting its citizens. So you see a lot of this kind of jurisdictional dispute. And this goes into the kind of the cost of litigation, right? Is the first step is finding is this contract enough? Like if I'm a California, which I think we all know how non-competes work in California. If I'm a California resident, but I sign, a Nebraska company's non-compete and Nebraska law governs and all this, well, California has an interest in its citizens, in protecting its citizens. And you say, well, you subjected yourself to jurisdiction in Nebraska. You need to be here and we're going to enforce this. Well, you're going to have, before you even get to the merits of the case, a fight between the two parties, me as a defendant, as an individual in California, and then the company in Nebraska saying, well, hey, yeah, I know you say that, but I'm a California resident and all your stuff doesn't apply to me. So you get this jurisdictional fight that just drives up the legal fees affiliated with that. And if you're an individual who left, unless you're someone who is high up on the chain, and we're talking about, lower level people most of the time, your dispatchers, your HR, maybe even some operations or manager level, they're not to the point where they're in a position to spend 60, 70, 80 grand.
Yeah.
This type of litigation, nor does the company feel like their value lost unless, again, you went scorched earth when you left, where there's animus against you from the company. So those types of disputes right away make those discussions regarding enforcement difficult because it really depends on the language of the contract that has it. It depends on what state law applies and then what state law governs the individual. We deal with this on a misclassification disputes, right? You have a motor carrier that's domiciled in Alabama. They have drivers in Michigan. Well, they're independent contractor drivers domiciled in Michigan. Well, we say this law governs over here, but hey, I was doing all my work in Michigan. I think Michigan law should cover my, misclass, because I think you treated me like an employee under Michigan law. And so you have this constant push and pull.
Mm-hmm.
What jurisdiction governs. And I will say it's not an easy decision to identify. Now, as representing the company, I would certainly push for, hey, listen, this is something that this law, the contract's clear, you signed the contract, this is what law is governing. Don't try to get out of this. And if I'm the individual, I'm sitting there trying to figure out, can I really fight this? What kind of negotiation or settlement can I come to with the party if there's even an opportunity to do so? And for those people, if you took trade secrets, the opportunity to recover against you is much greater.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that would help to know whatever the situation was. But if, you talk about settlement, like is that assuming they're already in a legal dispute at that point?
Yeah. So it may be the fact that there's litigation. I know we only have a few minutes left and probably of questions, but a settlement can come at any point during a dispute. It could be a demand letter and you say, hey, listen, I'm not going to touch those clients anymore. Hey, the freight tech that I'm building or whatever is not going to do this. It's completely separate, right? And you get kind of written admissions. And I will say, there are a number of things we can do from a company standpoint, right? For, you as a small business owner, right? Saying, what can I do? And me as a small business owner, what are those things we can do to protect ourselves? Well, having a non-compete that conforms with the law is first and foremost, right? There are people in Oklahoma being one, a jurisdiction where we have a number of clients. You can't prohibit indirect solicitation, right? So if your contract says direct and indirect, there's a chance that everything gets kind of wiped out, right? And so you want to be clear that make sure that first and foremost, your non-compete in the state where you're saying that it should be governed is accurate and enforceable. That's step one. And if you have that and you send a demand letter and the attorney gets it, says, well, yeah, there's going to be a dispute here. We're going to try to get at this. But anytime you get attorneys involved, you've already lost if you're the individual, because now you're having to do, unless it truly was, hey, I have an opportunity truly to make a lot of money somewhere else and it's a risk worth taking. But be upfront with your recruiter be upfront with your new employer. They will
Yeah.
probably find a way to make this work. Hey, if you have a non-solicit, just don't touch those clients for the next year or 2 years, depending on what
Yeah.
your ability is. There's enough opportunities out there. And we believe, based on we're hiring you, maybe not necessarily your book of business. Book of business would be nice, but we believe in you.
And that's it. That's the thing I always tell organizations: like, hire the person, not the book. If you're hiring someone who has the skills and abilities, they'll create the return on investment if they've proven that they have the skills and abilities to whatever, go find business or whatever. But yes, we are bumping up on time. I want to rapid fire a couple questions here before we finish off. Um, one on broker carrier liability. So, like, okay, Carmack Amendment. Um, does that still hold weight? Like, what's the impact of that now, and who is liable for freight in transit?
So the Carmack Amendment still governs that. If we're talking about interstate transport, it's not an exempt commodity, and you essentially have, goods that are being transported across state lines. Now, whether it's an interstate shipment or not is truly, can be fact specific, because if you say, oh, well, I'm just doing the intrastate move, it could still be part of an interstate shipment. So Carmack still governs that, unless we're dealing with something that came through a through bill of lading from the ports, and now you're possibly dealing with COGSA, which is the Carriage of Goods by Sea Act. But in most instances, most of the things that we see with the few COGSA arguments and liability regimes sprinkled in, Carmack is governing. If you're a broker, you are not liable for cargo loss or damage in transit unless you accept liability or you hold yourself out as a motor carrier. So if you're a broker and signing carrier contracts, you are likely going to be liable. Now, the issue here is the disconnect with your insurance company. So you need to make sure that your contracts align, so that way you can turn to your insurance company for contingent cargo and get coverage. So brokers can be liable for cargo loss or damage. Our firm handled a really large case that kind of was precedent setting across the country that dealt with that, as well as personal injuries for liability to brokers. But brokers are not liable unless you agree to be liable or you hold yourself out as motor carrier. That can be something on your website that says, hey, we handle everything in your transportation. One-stop shop for all things transportation.
Gotcha. Yep.
One specific shipment, your person, your dispatcher, your broker is communicating with the company, essentially saying, hey, listen, telling them that we're the motor carrier on this shipment. So it can be on a load specific basis, or it can be on an overall how you present yourself.
So how you represent yourself is what matters the most. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Good news here is we're gonna have to bring Bryan back another time. So that'll have to happen, because we've got a ton of more questions. But and so for my folks who are listening, who have lots more questions, don't worry, we'll get Bryan back another time. But typically I close this way: what are a couple of books, a book or a couple of books that have been helpful for you on your journey to where you are today that you would share?
So I am going to kind of hit back and say I actually really enjoy comic books. So I know that they have word books in them. Mm-hmm. And I would say that especially some of the older comics, they'll make references that I don't remember, and then there's a few apps that I have, where subscriptions where I'll read a comic. It'll take me an hour and a half to read one comic. Mm-hmm. And that's because I am researching the either political, spiritual, international references. Sometimes it leads me to, wartime analysis. Sometimes it leads me to other religions. Sometimes it leads me to, something in historical, whether it's, Roman, Old English, or even US history. And I'm like, I have no idea who that person that they made a reference or what a phrase that they did. And then I find myself doing research about, some specific phrase or some individual that had an impact on our, shared history that I had no idea about, wasn't taught in school. And now I've learned something outside of this context. So I feel like when I read books, I usually generally have kind of, I'm within this world and I never have to look outside of it. With comic books, I feel like I'm pulled in a way, and maybe I read comics different than other people, but it's usually a starting point for research for me into kind of history and or, type of mentality that's different than a lot of the books that I read.
That's cool. I like that. Gives you a chance to go dive into historical, moral thoughts and frameworks that were important as to why they created that comic.
That is correct.
That's cool. Okay, very good. Well, man, I appreciate your time a ton. It's been awesome having you on. Enjoyed it, entertaining, and like I said, hopefully we can have you back at another time. So, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Email is best, or call our office. Email is bnelson, so B for Bryan Nelson at taylorlawpl.com. bnelson@taylorlawpl.com, or just Bryan J. Nelson, partner Taylor Nelson.
He's an entertaining follow on LinkedIn. You should do that as well. Awesome. All right. We appreciate your time. Thanks a ton, Bryan.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Recruiting Stories podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on LinkedIn. Adrian Chapman and Cover 3 Consulting is our company page. Also check out our website, www.cov3consulting.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we just simply want to remind you that you can change the world by putting people in a position where they can do the most good, and you do that by recruiting. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.